When I asked why he had created a family credit card without consulting me, Alan laughed and said,
Come on, we're family. Of course, we should have a family card. What's your problem? Do you even remember who took in a loner like you? You shouldn't be complaining.
His condescending tone, which I'd never heard before, left me speechless. Is this really who Alan is?
If you're grateful, show it by taking care of my family more. Then maybe we'll recognize you as part of the family. Until then, think of it like a learner's permit.
A learner's permit for marriage. I've never heard of such a ridiculous idea. Seeing my silence, Alan pressed on with more intensity.
In other words, you're not an official family member yet. And if you don't like it, you can leave anytime. For now, our family is still just 5 people. We don't need a useless parasite hanging around.
I understand. I canceled every single credit card immediately and moved out. My name is Natalie Brown. I'm 27 years old. I'm a freelance illustrator. I used to work as a designer at a large advertising agency, but became independent 2 years ago after getting married. I now work from home. My parents passed away in an accident when I was a child. I was taken in by my maternal grandparents, but when I went to college, I moved back to my late parents' apartment near downtown Chicago and have lived there ever since. I met Alan at the Italian restaurant where he worked. The place had a cozy atmosphere, great food, and reasonable prices, so my coworkers and I became regulars. At one point, we started joking about the handsome waiter there. It was Alan. Alan was undeniably attractive. The manager even joked once that a good chunk of their regulars came just to see Alan, and I had to agree it. I won't deny that I was one of those admirers who thought he was incredibly charming. That's just how noticeable Alan was. But somehow we quickly grew close, and before I knew it, we were calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. And to my surprise, we ended up getting married. I don't remember much from that time. It felt like one of those mornings when you wake up after a night out and suddenly realize there's someone next to you. But even so, I loved Alan and was happy back then. I left my design company when we got married and went independent. It was an amicable departure where I continued taking on freelance projects from the same company. Alan kept working at the Italian restaurant. His schedule varied depending on the day, with late nights being common. Since his work hours were irregular and it always wanted to be independent, I took the leap.
I think that's great, Natalie. You'll feel more relaxed and get to keep doing the work you love.
And so, our married life began. Neither of us was into flashy things, so we skipped a formal wedding and only made our marriage official. We just visited each other's families to say hello. Alan would go to work while I stayed home, balancing my job and housework. Even though our schedules didn't always align, we'd stay in touch and have dinner together when he got home. It was a fun and happy life. Marriage really felt wonderful. But about a year into our marriage, Alan suddenly said something that shook everything apart.
My family wants to visit soon. Is that okay?
Of course, I said yes. I had only spoken briefly with Alan's family during introductions, so I was looking forward to getting to know them better. Having lost my parents young, I'd always admired the idea of a big family. So, when his family of 4 showed up, I was left speechless.
Hey, where's my room?
Alan's sister, Harper, asked the moment she stepped inside. Harper was 32, 5 years older than both Alan and me. From what I'd heard, she worked as a cashier at a local grocery store. When we first met, she had been polite, but her tone now was startlingly rude. With Harper was her younger sister, Amanda, who was 18. Unlike Harper, Amanda stood silently and didn't say a word. I remembered how, even during our first meeting, Amanda had only introduced herself and stayed quiet. Feeling pressured by Harper, I led both sisters to the guest room and showed their parents to the spare bedroom. Once everyone had put away their things, Harper announced,
All right, since we're all living here now, you'd better start taking care of us.
I didn't understand what she meant. I glanced at Alan for help, but he smiled in a way I'd never seen before, a crooked and unsettling grin. It turned out that his family had sold their house and moved straight into my apartment without telling me.
Sorry about this. I guess their old house got hit with a sudden eviction, and they didn't have anywhere else to go.
If that was the case, why didn't he tell me sooner? I had assumed they were only staying for a day or two. This situation was really frustrating. I tried to explain my concerns as calmly as possible so as not to offend Alan. He lowered his head apologetically.
Please, just until they find a place to live.
If he said that much, I couldn't refuse it. I couldn't bring myself to kick out people who had nowhere to go, especially when they were the family of someone important to me, with no place to turn. I made them promise to find a place as soon as possible and reluctantly agreed to let them stay. But that decision would come back to haunt me. Alan's family showed no consideration whatsoever. All four of them, from the day they moved in, did absolutely nothing, leaving everything to me and speaking to me however they pleased. They didn't even pretend to be looking for a new place or a job. Out of curiosity, I asked what had happened to their jobs, and I was stunned by their response.
Oh, I quit that lame grocery store.
I had assumed Harper was a full-time employee since she had mentioned working there, but it turned out she was only a part-timer. I had assumed, because of her age, that she was working full-time, but after listening to her, I learned she had never held a stable job since graduating from high school. Her parents were also part-timers, and they too had quit their job before coming here. Of course, Amanda wasn't working. She had claimed to be a student preparing for college, but that was a lie.
There's no way we could commute to our old jobs from here. And besides, why would we need to work when we've joined a rich family?
A rich family? Who in the world were they referring to? Confused, I asked, and the answer shocked me.
They're talking about you. You got a huge payout from your parents' accident insurance, didn't you? And I heard this apartment doesn't even have a mortgage. You should be able to live the easy life.
Harper laughed as she said it. It was too much, so I confronted Alan when he came home, only for him to look more annoyed than I'd ever seen and raise his voice.
They had to leave their home suddenly. They must be exhausted. Can't you let them rest for a while? Or are you saying you'd throw my family out on the street?
I was frozen in shock, and then Alan's tone softened suddenly.
I'm sorry for shouting. I'm struggling too. And it's been a long day. I'm really tired. Can you please understand? Just hang in there a little longer.
Alan was skilled at handling women. Looking back now, I see that had always switched between being sweet and harsh to get his way. But at the time, I didn't realize it and reluctantly agreed to wait just a little longer. However, his family's behavior only got worse. When they were home, they treated me like a servant, ordering me around. When they went out, they demanded money.
How can we go job hunting with no money? I mean, we could try, but if we don't find work, we'll just stay here forever.
I had no choice but to give them some cash. only for them to return claiming they didn't find anything and spend all the money. I doubted they even went job hunting. But if I accused them of lying without proof, they would gang up on me and criticize me for hours. Telling Alan about it didn't help either.
They're frustrated because they can't find work. I'm sorry, just hold on a little longer. I'll talk to them.
And that was the end of the conversation every time. Eventually, I felt like speaking up was pointless. Alan must have said something to them at some point because their demands for cash became less frequent, but I never got any of the money back. That chaotic life continued for about 3 months until one day, I realized something alarming. Why is the credit card bill so high? Could this be unauthorized use? I hurriedly checked the statement, and every charge came from the family cards. The purchases ranged from food and drinks to books, games, expensive designer handbags, and clothes. There were 5 different card numbers listed. In other words, 5 family cards had been issued. Our credit card account was under my name, and Alan was supposed to be the only one using the family cards.
You're better at handling these things, and it's more convenient to manage payments this way, right? Can I leave it to you?
That's what Alan had said when I first took over managing the account, but it seemed he had secretly ordered additional family cards. The reason his family had stopped asking me for money was that they had started using the cards. When I found out, I was furious. When I asked Alan why he had created family cards for his parents and sisters without telling me, he laughed.
If I told you we didn't have any money, you'd just complain, right? Besides, do you remember who took you in when you were all alone? You should be grateful to your savior's family.
His arrogant tone, unlike anything I had heard before, left me speechless. Is this really who Alan is?
If you're grateful, show it by taking better care of my family. Then we'll recognize you as part of the family. Until then, think of yourself as having a learner's permit.
A learner's permit for marriage? I had never heard of such nonsense. Alan, seemingly unimpressed by my silence, doubled down.
In other words, you're not officially part of the family yet. And if you don't like it, you're free to leave anytime. For now, our family has 5 members, and we don't need any useless freeloaders.
That's when I finally saw Alan's true nature. It felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. I began thinking seriously about divorce. Come to think of it, how did I even end up marrying Alan in the first place? I decided to start by recalling that. When I think about it, in the beginning, I just thought Alan was a good-looking guy. I was just one of the girls who admired him and got excited over how handsome he was. I didn't have any plans beyond that. But one day, while I was away from the table heading to the restroom, Alan spoke to me.
Natalie, you seem different from the others.
What?
I don't know. Attractive. Sorry, I shouldn't say that to a customer.
My heart skipped a beat. That kind of exchange kept happening, and I started becoming more aware of Alan. Looking back, I wonder if all of that was part of his plan to make me fall for him. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed likely. Come to think of it, one of my coworkers once joked about me in front of Alan, saying I was from a wealthy family and lived alone in a large apartment near downtown Chicago. Shortly after that, Alan started approaching me more frequently. He was probably interested in my assets and this apartment from the beginning. Alan wasn't even my type. He was a modern man in a good way, but in a bad way, he was somewhat of a playboy. I preferred calm, mature men I could have meaningful conversations with. Yet somehow, I fell for Alan. I've always wondered why. Alan was what you'd call a pretty boy. He was probably used to making women fall for him. It was second nature. Especially someone like me, who was inexperienced with men and had only just started her career. I bet he was confident he could easily make me obsessed with him. And I fell right into his trap and even ended up marrying him. The thought filled me with anger and humiliation, making me want to break everything in the house. But I wasn't foolish enough to actually do that. Instead, I resolved to get my revenge. To do that, I knew I had to endure this situation just a little longer. If Alan could manipulate me, then I would make his entire family dance in the palm of my hand. The apartment I live in was bought by my father with a loan shortly after I was born. Back then, real estate prices weren't as high, but after a large shopping mall was built nearby, the neighborhood flourished, and now it's considered a luxury apartment complex. My parents, who wanted a large family, bought a spacious unit so there would be enough room even if the family grew. That's why it's big enough for Alan's family to move in without feeling cramped. However, even with its size, it's still just an apartment. For someone like me who works from home, having Alan's entire family around was unbearable. But I endured it for the sake of my revenge. Just like Harper said, there's no mortgage on this place. When I was 3 years old, my parents both passed away. It was a car accident. They had attended my paternal grandfather's funeral, and on their way back, they were hit by a speeding car on the highway. I was supposed to go with them that day, but I had come down with a high fever from the flu that was going around at the time. So, my maternal grandparents came to stay at the apartment to take care of me. That's how I ended up being left alone. The loan was covered by the life insurance, so the insurance company paid it off. The only housing costs I pay are for maintenance fees and property taxes. When Alan saw how low those expenses were, he said he would contribute just a bit more than that amount to our household budget.
There's no mortgage. If I'm pitching in that much, your income should be enough to cover the rest. We'll each pay for our own personal expenses. Does that work for you?
When Alan said that, I naively agreed, thinking it made sense. Until then, I had covered all the expenses by myself, so I thought his contribution would at least ease the burden a little. Looking back, I realize how foolish that was. But at the time, I was blinded by my love for Alan and just went along with everything he said. Alan probably believed he was the head of the household, the breadwinner, and that he was providing for me. That's why he felt justified in calling me a parasite. But the truth was entirely different. I was the one paying for utilities, groceries, outings, and entertainment. And now, 5 more freeloaders had been added to that list. There was no way I could manage it on such a small budget. I wanted to get rid of the freeloaders as soon as possible, but I deliberately turned a blind eye for now. Alan's family spent money on whatever they pleased, while I endured it all, gritting my teeth. I am the one who laughs last. I told myself so over and over to get through this tough time. Finally, the day came for me to act. It was 3 months after I decided to get a divorce. I'm done. I'm exhausted. Choose me or your family. That day, I gave Alan an ultimatum. He was shocked, but I continued without hesitation. Not a single one of your family members lifts a finger to help. They dump all the chores on me. As you know, I work from home. It's not like I'm lounging around all day. And yet you treat me like a freeloader and tell me to know my place? I've had enough. Tears streamed down my face as I confronted him. Alan looked at me, flashed a sly smile, and said,
If that's how you feel, then you should leave. I've told you before. You're not a real member of the family yet. If you're already throwing in the towel, it just means you never earned your family license.
I looked at Alan, pretending to be shocked.
Why are you acting surprised? If you can't live with my family, then you have no choice but to leave. Oh, and by the way, since I'm not at fault here, he'll be keeping this apartment as compensation. And he'll take half of your savings too.
So that's what this was all about. That's why his whole family kept harassing me to make me leave. Even though I already knew, hearing him say it so bluntly still hurt. I had once loved this man enough to marry him after all. But his words solidified my resolve. Understood. I decided to divorce Alan. However, this apartment is mine, and I've done nothing wrong.
What did you say?
The reason for our divorce is that you moved your family in without consulting me and allowed them to mistreat me, I told Alan firmly. Alan looked utterly shocked, as though he never expected me to outright reject his demands. I suppose that made sense. I had always gone along with his every request since we got married. Remembering that made me even angrier with myself. I don't want to spend another second with any of you. I'll leave for now, but you need to start packing too.
You've got to be kidding. This is our home. We're not leaving. Do you even know about residency rights? You can't force people out of a home they're living in.
I listened to Alan's yelling as I walked out the door and headed to my grandparents' house. I explained everything and asked them to stay until things were settled. They were shocked, and when they learned what I had been through, they were furious. Tears welled up in their eyes as they scolded me for not coming to them sooner. Grandpa and Grandma, I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'll be okay now. You know me, I may look like a quiet person, but I'm not. I forced a smile as tears filled my eyes. The day after I left the apartment, Alan called me.
What the hell is this?
What are you talking about?
That's certified mail.
I was impressed by how efficient my lawyer was. I had informed them yesterday that I was leaving, and they had ensured the papers were delivered promptly today.
There's no way I'm paying any compensation, and I'm not leaving that apartment either.
But legally, you are required to pay, and you have no right to stay in that apartment.
What are you talking about? We're married, and the apartment mine too. If you insist, then buy me out for half its value.
What an absurd demand. This conversation isn't going anywhere. Please contact my lawyer from now on. With that, I hung up. I figured I'd call again the next day, but I wasn't in the mood to deal with him any further today. Sure enough, the next morning, my phone rang again.
What the hell is this?
The exact same line as yesterday. How unimaginative. What do you mean?
The credit card isn't working. What did you do?
What did I do? I canceled it. The card is mine, and you were just using a family card. Remember that? Yes, before I left, I switched all my automatic payments to a different card and canceled the family cards. Of course, when I canceled it, your family card became useless.
I was making payments too.
Oh, you mean the maintenance fees and property taxes? And only for the first 2 months. It wasn't much, but if you'd like, I can deduct that from your compensation. I spoke mockingly, and I could hear an incoherent scream from the other end of the call. Alan had only made payments for the first 2 months. After that, he made all sorts of excuses, claiming he needed time because of issues at work, and stopped paying altogether. If he had convinced himself that he had been contributing all along, his memory was truly pathetic. but I no longer cared. He was someone I was cutting ties with. Whatever his memory was like didn't matter to me anymore. That's how it is. And you'll need to pay your share of the household expenses I've been covering. I've kept detailed records, and I'll be submitting them as evidence.
Then I want half of the savings too. That's marital property.
Of course, we'll divide everything fairly. When I said that, he spat out a final, "Don't forget it," and hung up.
What the hell is this?
A few days later, he called again with the same opening line. He doesn't just have a bad memory, and he also has a terrible vocabulary. What do you mean?
The division of shared assets. Why is it 0? You've got loads of money from your parents, insurance payout and settlement, don't you?
Oh, so that's what he thought all along. I calmly explained that any savings I had before the marriage weren't considered shared assets, and that since there were no savings made after we got married, the division naturally resulted in 0.
Stop lying.
If you think I'm lying, why don't you consult someone about it? Either way, from now on, everything will go through my lawyer. We won't be speaking directly again. Goodbye. With that, I hung up and blocked Alan's number. 2 months after I left the apartment, Alan and his family finally moved out. Not because they had changed their ways or felt remorse. It was simply because they couldn't afford to live there anymore. Alan's income alone wasn't enough to support 5 people. His family had been living large using my credit cards. There was no way they could suddenly switch to a frugal lifestyle. I had let them spend freely for that very reason. I knew exactly how things would turn out. Alan's family began demanding shopping money from him. When he refused, they started stealing cash from his wallet. When Alan got angry, they all ganged up on him, saying it was his fault for kicking me out. On top of that, the electricity, gas, and water were all cut off. Of course, I had requested the utilities be shut off. I had notified the utility companies that I wouldn't be living there for a while. Alan tried calling to have them restored, but since the house was under my name, there was no way the service could be resumed at his request. Unable to bear the intense summer heat that carried into early fall, his family finally left the apartment. I had no idea where they went, and I didn't care to find out. Alan held out as long as he could, refusing to leave, but eventually gave up when he couldn't stand living in a place with no power or running water. After that, my divorce proceedings moved along faster than I expected. Not because Alan had reflected on his actions or agreed to my terms, but because he made yet another mistake. Before the divorce was even finalized, he had an affair. Actually, it seemed he had started seeing other women fairly early on, probably thinking that he had succeeded in getting rid of me. He bragged to young women that he owned a luxury apartment in a prime downtown location and brought them back to the place. It amazed me that he could do that with his entire family still living there. But apparently, they didn't mind since had been doing similar things even when he lived at his parents' house. Given his looks, I wouldn't say it was entirely unexpected. Knowing that, I had set up cameras in a few spots around the apartment before I left. All the evidence was recorded there. Maybe Alan thought I was too weak-willed to do something like that, but he had seriously underestimated me. I compiled everything. His mistreatment of me by moving his family in without my consent, creating family credit cards in secret and charging me for everything, kicking me out, and now the affair. With all that, I demanded a substantial amount of compensation. When Alan saw the amount, his face turned pale, and he desperately begged me to reconcile. Of course, I had no intention of taking him back. I knew he couldn't afford to pay the full amount, so I pushed for him to borrow as much as possible from his company. When I threatened to report the unauthorized family card creation as fraud, he grudgingly agreed to pay. I hope he works hard to pay off that debt. After the divorce was granted, I am still at my grandparents' house. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. I might sell it. I had cherished it because my parents left it for me. But since they passed away when I was too young to form memories and because of everything that happened, I think they'd understand if I let it go. My freelance illustration work is gradually increasing. I might live alone again someday, but these days, it's easy to work efficiently even while staying at my grandparents' house. I'll lean on them a little longer and then start moving forward again. This time, I hope I'll find a partner who will walk through life with me, not someone who only looks good on the outside.